This story took place when I worked at one of those haunted mazes for the month of October. It pays minimum wage, so I get a little spending money to get me through college. Our maze is a corn maze / haunted house. I am not one of those people who get to jump out with a bloody mask and scare the visitors. I'm the girl who works the picture counter. You see, the maze I work at takes a picture of you when you go through a certain part of it, and then at the end of the maze, you can see the picture of you and your friends looking ridiculous and scared, and you can buy it for $5. It's actually pretty fun to see everyone's faces. There are some pretty hilarious ones. So I've been working here for a few weeks, a couple nights a week. A lot of people have come through, hundreds, and every single one of them has been caught screaming, jumping, staring in horror, etc. at that one point where the picture is taken. But Friday night that changed. At about 8:30 p.m., a picture loaded on my computer, and I set to print it. I was told, through text, that it was a party of one, so I should print only one copy. I got ready to do so, and glanced at the picture. It was a single man, completely dressed in black, head adorned with a jet black bowler hat. He wasn't screaming, wasn't cringing away. He was facing right at the camera, his face shrouded in shadow. It unnerved me. I have never seen someone not react. Never. But whatever. Maybe he was just used to it, or maybe someone told him what to expect. I got over it and finished my night, selling people their funny memories. Just as we were shutting down around 11, I was packing up the unsold pictures when I saw the man's picture again. Then I realized I had never seen him ask if he wanted to buy it. It was odd, as they had to pass my kiosk to get out of the maze. I just decided to not let it worry me and drove home. But here's where it gets scary and weird. Okay, so I went back to work yesterday, Saturday, and I did my job until around 8:30, and then the picture came through. Party of one, man completely in black, not scared, staring at the camera. But this time I could sort of see his face. He was smiling, in the most frightening way possible, practically all his teeth showing. I felt sick to my stomach, and actually wanted to leave, but I couldn't, obviously, as Saturdays are our busiest nights. Finally, the end of the night rolled around, and he never came back to get his photo again. I told my boss to come check it out, showed him both photos, and told him how the guy never showed up to see me. I was visibly shaken, but he told me not to worry about it, that it was probably some practical joker who was trying to freak us out or something. So I'm convinced the man, or whoever he is, knows who I am and that I'm here, and I think he's purposely here for me. Last night, Sunday, I asked my boss if I could have someone work with me because I was nervous. However, he denied my request because we didn't have extra people working, which I get. I guess Sundays aren't busy this early before Halloween most years, but this one was turning out to be, so he didn't prepare me for needing a bodyguard. He said he would come every hour or so to check up on me if I ever wanted him to. I felt kinda stupid and childish. It was early in the night, so it was still light out, and everything felt okay, you know? I was lured into a false sense of security, I suppose. So I told him it was fine. I would just keep in contact and tell him if things got weird. Well, they did get weird. At around 7:45 or so, I realized I had to pee. So I texted my boss and asked if he would send someone over to cover for me. He didn't reply, which is really odd because he usually texts back super fast to maintain order if something was going bad. When he finally replied to me, it was 8:21. I know, because I was glancing at my phone every 30 seconds. He said he would send a girl working the ticket counter. I'm going to call her Alex, even though that's not her real name because I'm paranoid, to switch with me for a bit and he would work tickets. As soon as Alex got to the photo kiosk, I practically ran to the bathroom, which is actually just some bad nasty porta potty, because I had to pee so bad. There was a line, of course, and I stood waiting impatiently. Just as I was about to go in, movement to my left caught my attention. I looked over there, which is just more empty cornfield, and that isn't part of the maze. It stretches on for miles, and I saw him. I freaking saw him, standing there, in the corn, the same sinister smile on his face. I looked around and noticed there was no line. No people were around me. My blood ran cold, and my heart was beating faster than it ever was, I swear. I jumped into the porta potty, locked myself in, and threw up. I started crying like a little baby, shaking and heaving. I literally stayed in there for 15 minutes. As I walked back, I kept my eyes straight ahead, pointedly ignoring the cornfields beside me. As soon as I got back to the photo kiosk, Alex noticed I was messed up, and she texted our boss. He couldn't leave the ticket counter, unmannered, so he told Alex to stay here with me until I was okay. I have this irrational fear of letting people down, so I reassured her that I was fine, and that she should go back to work tickets, and that I would be fine. I'm stupid sometimes, but it's just this thing I have. I hate letting people down. So much so I was willing to be terrified alone at the damn kiosk for another 2 hours. Dumb, I know. So Alex left, rather reluctantly I think, and I was alone again. By this time it was almost 9 p.m. I decided to look at the pictures from around 8:30 to see if he had gone through. He hadn't. I think he knew I wasn't at the kiosk, and that's why he was in the corn by the bathrooms and not in the maze. I don't understand what I possibly did to make him come after me. Maybe he's not evil. Maybe he just has a message for me or something. I know I should just quit this job, but I can't stomach the thought of leaving them all with no one. It's hard to get someone and train them this close to Halloween because it's always so busy. I also don't want to just leave, because I have this feeling in the pit of my stomach, an almost primal feeling, that no matter where I go, he's going to follow. This story took place a couple days ago. Ever since this experience, I have decided to never offer a ride to another person on the side of the road ever again. It all started on a random Tuesday. I had just clocked out of work a couple hours early and was headed on the way home. I was excited as I was planning on watching a new movie I had just recorded the previous night. By the way, I am 40 years old and I am married and have a family, although I never saw this coming. As I was driving home, it was around 8 p.m., so it was fairly dark outside. I was driving down some open country roads in the middle of nowhere, when suddenly my headlights illuminated a person standing on the side of the road. The man was sticking out his thumb, indicating he needed a ride. I slowed down a little, and my mind began racing. Should I pick up the guy and give him a ride, or should I go home and watch my movie? I don't know what it was, but something made me stop and offer him a ride. Maybe because he looked to be around my age. I rolled down my window and asked him what he was doing in the middle of nowhere. He basically explained how his car broke down at work and he was forced to walk home. But as the sun started to set, he decided to try and get a ride from someone. I asked him where he was headed. Up by Livingston, he replied. Livingston was the next door town to the one I live in, so I figured giving this guy a ride would not take long. I then unlocked my car and allowed the man inside. Instantly the guy was extremely polite, asking how my day was and asking my name. We had a whole conversation for about 10 minutes. I found out his name was James, and he also had a family and 2 children. I realized picking up James was a great idea, up until the worst happened. As we continued driving down the dark road, James pulled out a gun from his back pocket and pointed it straight at my head. Now, you're gonna do as I say whenever I say, got it? He screamed. I was completely shook. This guy I was having a good conversation with all of a sudden was trying to kill me. It was hard to comprehend as I was beginning to panic and fear for my life. James then told me to make a right onto some old dirt road in the middle of nowhere. This is where I truly began to get scared. I knew there was no way to get to Livingston going down this road, but I couldn't try anything or else I would risk getting killed. So I continued down this road. Eventually, after another 10 minutes, we pulled up to this old abandoned building in the middle of the woods. I really mean nowhere. There was no sign of anyone out here. James ordered me to stop the car at the entrance of the abandoned building. I had my eyes fixated on the door of the building when 2 other guys dressed in all black started walking out. They were headed straight towards my car, and they each had knives in their hand. I knew I was in grave danger, so I began pleading with James. Please, just let me go. I'll give you anything, please. This didn't seem to work, as he ordered me to step out the car while the gun was still pointed directly at me. My body was shaking and voice was trembling as I stepped out. I was now surrounded by the 3 guys. Empty all your pockets, give me everything, wallet, keys, phone, whatever. Hesitantly, I began emptying all my pockets, giving the three guys all my cards, cash, my phone, and my car keys. "Get the hell out of here and never return," he screamed. Without saying a word, I began walking down the dark dirt road at night. "Do you understand? You better not tell anyone about this or we'll find you," they threatened me. Traumatized without a flashlight, I began trying to find my way back towards the main road. By this time, it must have been around 10 p.m. Somehow I ended up finding my way back on the main road, where coincidentally, I ran into a cop sitting on the side of the road. I told him the entire story. The cop ended up calling an ambulance for me. He then called for backup and drove down the dark dirt road towards the abandoned building. I was driven home by the ambulance and met with my wife and kids. I was so happy to have survived. A couple hours later, we hear a knock at the front door. At this point, it must have been 1 a.m., but as I looked out the window, I realized it was the police. I unlocked the door, only to see the same police officer that saved me earlier. He gave me my cash, cards, my phone, and my keys. The cop then explained what happened. When he arrived, he found the three guys getting in my car. Since he called for backup, they were able to surround my car and arrest the three guys. The cop then had my car towed to the police station. He said I would be able to pick it up in the morning. So in the end, everything worked out fine. But it scares me to think about how lucky I was to not have been killed by those three guys. When I was around 15, my family and I moved into a 3-bedroom house. My older sister chose the bigger bedroom, and I didn't really care much at the time, so I got stuck with the smaller room down the hall, which kinda looked creepy. This is because there was a window at the end of the hallway, right next to my room. My bedroom would be on the side of where the window was, so when you go out of the room, on your right, you'd see a small window on the wall next to me where the hallway ends. As I was getting my stuff into my bedroom, I saw something odd, which looked like a nail, which was sitting on the windowsill. I ignored it and just went back into my new room. Little did I know that this house was previously owned by a crazy old woman who had died in this house. My parents told me this after, when things started to get worse. So anyway, as I unpacked everything and sorted my stuff, I felt a cold breeze come out of nowhere. Mind you, it was freaking summer and was very hot during that time. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black figure, unmoving right where the window was. I was 6 to 7 feet away from it because I was in my room. During this time, I froze and felt tingles down my spine. As quickly as I saw the figure, it disappeared. I ran downstairs to my parents and didn't have words to explain what just occurred. After calming down for a bit, I told him about the black figure, and my father went upstairs with me to check up on it. "You're not a child anymore, Sky." I felt hurt because he thought I was playing around with him. He then checked everywhere, my room and the window close by, but there was nothing. A few hours went by, and we were all eating dinner. My older sister was in a bad mood, and was texting her friends at the table, which she always used to do. I was the talkative one, whenever it was time to eat dinner with my family, whereas in reality, I'm an introverted girl. So I was asking how my dad's day went, because he works as a construction worker. He said it was okay. That's when suddenly we heard a loud thump coming from upstairs. You could kinda see the hallway because that's where the stairs that led upstairs were. My dad then asked, "What was that?" in a concerned tone. He got up from the dining table and grabbed his old bat that he always kept in the kitchen if we were ever in danger. He slowly made his way upstairs, and we heard more sounds. The sounds only got louder, and I was scared shitless. He then got up to the final step and went to stand in front of my room. He also looked to the side where the window was outside in the hallway. No one was there, but sounds came mostly from my room. He tried opening the door, but it was locked. How could that be? I never locked it, and there's no key to lock it or anything that makes it locked. It was an old doorknob. My dad began to push all his body against the door, and it finally opened so hard that he nearly fell over. I wanted to see what the commotion was about, and I ran upstairs to see if he was okay. My dad told me he was fine, and the door was only stuck. As he was talking to me in my room, I just felt like looking into that window, and what I saw was dreadful. The dark figure was standing there again, outside, looking directly through the window. I screamed so loud that the neighbors could hear it. My dad rushed to me and didn't see anything. I told him something was there, but he just couldn't see it, and then the figure vanished. No one believes me to this day, but I'm glad we finally and eventually moved out of that creepy house. This happened a couple days ago. My cousin and I decided that we wanted to explore the woods in New Jersey. I am not going to disclose any locations due to privacy reasons. We wanted to explore the woods that were 30 minutes from our house. My cousin and I started riding our bikes towards the woods at 3. The ride to the woods was very boring, and it took a long time. When we got to the woods, we looked around for the path that led into the woods. After a few minutes of searching, we found a small, narrow path that led into the woods. We tied our bikes to a tree and started walking the path. At some point far in the woods, we started feeling as if we were being watched by something. That was when I turned on my camera and started recording. As I was recording, there was a loud, weird sound that came from deep in the forest. Here is the video with the sound. This startled my cousin and I, as we both were expecting to see something walk out of the woods. When the sound finally stopped, we were not able to see anything, so we both got really scared and ran out of the woods, leaving and going back home. Around 2 days later, my cousin and I decided that we wanted to go back in the same woods to see if we could find whatever made that sound. This time we arrived at the woods earlier, and we looked around for 1 hour. Since we cannot find anything, I started recording in hopes of catching something on camera. By this time, the sun started to go down, and the woods were getting very dark. We continued walking down the trail, further into the woods, while recording, in hopes of finding something. Then, out of nowhere, we heard a loud, scary screaming sound coming from deep in the woods. This sound was exactly the same as the sound we heard the first time. Here is the sound. At this point, my cousin and I were very convinced that there was something in the woods watching us. We both started running in the direction of the sound. We were so far in the woods that we no longer had cell service. Finally, we reached a large river, which we were not going to cross. As we were looking around, we heard running and sticks breaking from the other side of the river. We quickly looked towards the sound, but the only thing we could see was leaves and sticks moving, as if a large animal was walking through the woods. At this point, we both looked at each other and knew it was time to get out of there. To this day, we still don't know what animal made that scary sound. But one thing is for sure, some sort of large animal is living in those woods. I always loved hiking, especially through the woods. It was always so relaxing and calming. I would basically always hike around my neighborhood in the small woods behind my house. One day, I decided to drive to a specific hiking spot 30 minutes away. I packed up all my gear and I started driving towards the woods. On my way there, I realized that I decided to go too late and that the sun was already going down. Since I was almost there, I was not going to turn back now, so I continued. When I got to the woods, I took my gear out of my car and walked down the path. These woods were new to me, as this was my first time here. Looking back on it now, this was a very dumb idea, to go into the woods that I did not know at night. I took out my flashlight and shined it in front of me, illuminating the path. Since this was my first time in the woods, I decided to take some pictures and videos. After a little while of hiking further into the woods, I started hearing different noises from off the path that I was on. I was confident that it must have been some sort of animal, so I did not really think too much of it. At some point, I got a really bad feeling, as if I was walking into a trap. I stopped and shined my flashlight all around to make sure no one was watching me. That was when I saw a man about 50 feet from me waving his hand at me. This was a very scary experience. I kept my flashlight on the man as I slowly took out my phone to take a picture for safety. I decided to take the picture in case I needed to show it to the police. Once I was done, I switched off my flashlight and started running towards the car. After a few minutes, I felt really tired, so I slowed back down to walking speed. I was very scared, constantly thinking about the man in the woods. As I was walking down the narrow path, I started hearing loud footsteps to my right from the woods. I knew the man had followed me, so I quickly shined my light in that direction. That was when I saw the same man, but this time he was a lot closer. I quickly ran off the path into the dark woods in hopes of losing him. I did this because I did not want him following me to my car. Luckily, I had a compass on me, so I was able to find my way back to the car easily. When I finally got to my car, I felt a lot safer, until I turned on my car headlights. The lights shined bright into the woods, revealing the man running towards my car at full speed. I quickly turned my car in reverse and sped out of there. Later at my house, I looked at the picture of the man and realized that it was very blurry, but you can clearly see a man waving at me. I still don't know what to do about that situation, but I just hope the man did not follow my car to my house. This story took place a couple days ago at the amusement park my friends and I go to every year. We usually drive down to the shore and we stay a couple days by the beach. On the beach, there's a huge amusement park which has many rides and things to do. My friends and I normally like to stay at the amusement park as late as possible. Since it closes at 12 every single night, we stay till 12 every single night. On this particular day, my best friend dared me to go to the psychic so he can predict my future. This was a small area in the park that nobody really went to because it was boring. Since it was a dare, I obviously said yes, as I didn't want to look like a chicken in front of my friends. I started heading towards the psychic stand. I never believed in spiritual stuff or psychic stuff, so I was going to try and mess around with the person for a little. When we approached the psychic stand, we could see an older man sitting down on a chair reading a book. "Well, hello there," he said. "I was wondering if you could predict my future," I asked him. As soon as I said that, my friends started laughing because they wanted to make fun of me. The older man was kind though, and agreed without being bothered by my friends laughing. He gestured for me to follow him to the back area, because that's where he was going to predict my future. I was a little reluctant at first, but ended up following him. My friends stayed outside, so it was just me. The room was barely lit, and there was a chair in the middle. This was starting to look like something out of a horror movie. Nonetheless, I just sat on a chair and waited for whatever was going to happen. The man then pulled out a crystal clear ball that you see in movies and looked inside. I was trying not to laugh because I thought he was going to tell me some random shit. "Something tragic is going to happen to you tonight," he said in a creepy voice. My eyes widened as I stared at the man. "I would be very careful if I were you," he said. At that point, I've had enough. I was now extremely scared and concerned. "Thank you," I said and walked outside. My friends greeted me and asked how it went. "Let's just get out of here," I told them. I didn't want to be anywhere near that psychic place anymore, I was scared. In fact, I was terrified. What was going to happen to me? Am I safe? Those were the thoughts running through my head. After a couple of minutes, my friends tried to calm me down by telling me everything the guy said was fake. This helped a little, and we continued on our way in the amusement park, having fun. Everything was going great again, until we decided to get on a roller coaster. As soon as it was my turn to get on the coaster, the ride malfunctioned and stopped working. The ride operators told us they would check the ride to make sure everything is safe before opening again. 10 minutes later, they reopened the ride, and lots of people were getting on, including myself. Seconds before the ride was about to take off, I remembered what the psychic said earlier, and decided to not ride on the roller coaster. I got off, and somehow convinced everyone to get off the ride. I told the operators to have a test run on the cart before anyone gets back on. When they sent the coaster on its way, the craziest thing happened. The cart ended up malfunctioning again, sending it off track, falling about 10 feet. In that moment, I realized that was a very tragic thing that could have happened to myself and the people on the roller coaster. To this day, I still don't know whether the psychic's warning was a coincidence, or he really did know something tragic was going to happen to me. When I was in middle school, I would spend a lot of time at the rectory of my Catholic school during the summer. I was too old for daycare and too young to be left home alone. My mom was an administrator there and would sometimes give us the keys to the empty school for my brothers and I to play manhunt with our friends. We were very mischievous and crazy, which means we would sometimes snoop around places we weren't allowed to. Specifically the 4th floor, which you need a key to access from the elevator or emergency exit. It used to be a convent back, when they had nuns living and teaching there. A long dark corridor lined with rooms that used to be where they sleep. In the middle was a chapel, where the priest would hold mass for them. The main church for the public was downstairs, attached to the building. This chapel was not in use at the time, but over the years the school would occasionally hold art and music lessons there. It's the only reason I was familiar with it. So anyway, our little gang had a lot of rooms and things to explore on this floor. There was one room with a drum kit, the chapel, another empty room with a random bed that visiting priests would sometimes stay in if there wasn't space at the rectory, and a room full of holiday decorations. I was the youngest of the group, maybe 11 or so, and was kind of the odd one out. My brother and his friends liked to find cool old shit to steal that no one cared about. I just liked to snoop around. It was early afternoon, so the sun was beaming in through the windows, with the exception of that long dark corridor with all the rooms I described before. I was looking for my brother when I was about to turn a corner to that corridor, and this tall, brolic white priest comes walking up to me. He looked super stressed out. I was scared that he would tell my mom we were on the 4th floor, so I apologized for the intrusion and explained that we were leaving. I had no idea what the priest was visiting. My mom would normally have mentioned something like this, nevertheless give us the keys if someone was staying there. He shook his head and let out a big sigh, then asked me, "Where are the albs?" in a very exasperated tone. I said that I didn't know what those are, and apologized, but he kept asking over and over. Finally, he sighed again and walked back down the corridor. My heart was pounding because I knew my mom was going to be so pissed. I found my brother and we gathered everyone to hightail it the fuck out of there. My brother asked me where the guy went, and it was then I realized I didn't hear any doors open or close. Not only that, but I didn't hear any footsteps either. We looked around kinda confused and headed back to the rectory where my mom was having lunch at her desk. When I handed her the keys, I didn't waste any time coming clean about going to the 4th floor. I explained that I had met the new priest and she looked stunned, like genuinely concerned. There was no priest visiting. I told her about the Alps and asked what he was looking for. I couldn't have known that word, and she knew it. She immediately got on the phone with the custodian who lived nearby and asked him to do a sweep of the school and the church. They were concerned that someone had broken into the school. They never found anyone. Later that evening, I overheard my parents talking about this incident, and I heard my dad ask my mom if she thinks it might be the ghost of that priest who killed himself up there in the 60s. I also later found out that my brother's friend stole a couple of albs from a closet in the chapel. They might have belonged to that priest. I don't like to talk about this story because it makes my hair stand up and it makes me remember the day that it happened, and it scares me, to be quite honest. But I feel the need to tell others whether they believe me or not. One night I was on my computer, which is in my family room, next to the hallway that leads to the bathroom, and then the bedrooms. Located at the end of the hallway is my brother's room and my room. In the middle of the hallway is the bathroom, and at the opening of the hallway was my parents' room. I was home alone, talking to my friend on a voice chat application called Dolby Axon on the computer. Everything was fine, but my computer started to act up. Everything was slowing down, and when I was searching the internet, it took a while for things to load on the pages I clicked on. I thought nothing of it because my internet was pretty bad, and this had happened from time to time. My friend's voice started cracking up on the voice chat, so I figured I would just exit the application and just reopen it. When I went to do so, my computer shut off. That's strange, I thought. I took my headset off because while the computer was turning back on, I thought I heard something move or step in the hallway just a few meters away behind me. My dogs were with my parents at their friend's house next door, so it couldn't be them. My brothers were both at work, so it couldn't be them either. I just sat and listened for a bit until I heard it again. I turned to look and began to slowly get out of my chair. I walked towards whatever made that noise in the back rooms of my house. As I did, I began to turn on all the lights in the rooms as I went down the hallway. I saw nothing and returned back to my computer, opened up the chat application, and kept talking to my friend. But I kept the volume low, just in case I heard the footsteps-like noise again. I heard something a few moments later, but not footsteps. It sounded like something was in my bedroom, shutting the light switch off. "Hey Chris, I think I just heard someone shut a light switch off, but no one else is home with me," I said to my friend on the chat. At this point I was already pretty scared when I heard it again, this time closer. Like whatever was in my room moved up to my bathroom. I heard the light switch flick off. This time I told my friend about what was going on, and I was gonna leave the house for a bit to go to my neighbor's house and talk to them about what was going on. He was a bit confused and didn't really believe me, but without trying to convince him, I just left because I heard my parents' room light switch off, and they're the closest to where I was in the family room. When I left the house, I ran down the stairs and up the street to my neighbor's house where my parents were. I told them what was happening, but of course they thought I was imagining all of it and was over-exaggerating the situation. I didn't fight with them about it, but instead just believed them and thought to myself that maybe they were right. Maybe I did just imagine all of that somehow, and maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, I thought. Before I walked back down the street and up my stairs, I thought everything would be fine. I really hoped. I opened my front door and walked in, and the lights were all on. I thought, well, I must have really been imagining this. It just seemed so real. I'm a skeptic when it comes to paranormal, but something felt spiritual about what just happened. While trying to convince myself that what I just saw was just my imagination, I could not forget what I had just perceived. The way I heard what I thought was footsteps. Then after investigating the sound and turning on lights, I thought I heard the lights flicking back off, as if someone had just been undoing what I just did. I sat back down in my computer chair, put my headset on, and entered the chat room again. My friend Chris was still there, and the first thing I hear him saying is, Kevin, is that you? Stop messing with me, bro." I asked him, "What are you going on about right now?" And he responded, "That wasn't you? What was that? Are you trying to scare me, bro? Be for real." I replied, "I truly don't know what happened, Chris." He immediately responds, and he sounded terrified. "That wasn't you whispering in the mic?" My heart dropped. "Kevin, you have to get out of your house," Chris said. My stomach twisted. I felt sick to my stomach in fear. "No, that wasn't me," I said quickly. He tried saying something to me again, but all I heard was interference, like what you hear on a radio when you have no signal to a station. I broke down and started to cry. I didn't know any other way to react. I just ran out of my house, crying in absolute terror of how this night's events took place. I felt like I had lost hope, and whatever this thing was real. For the first time in my life, I felt I was in danger for something I could not physically fight back against. And the thought horrified me. I had no choice than to believe what happened to me was unexplainable, scary, and potentially real. Luckily, almost at exact moment I fled out of my front door, my parents were just arriving back home. I just embraced my mom with the biggest hug, telling her what happened in a jumble of words, because I was still crying and still scared. We went inside together, and everything was back to normal, like nothing ever happened. The lights were on, so was my computer. When I went on the voice chat, my friend sounded clear again, and was asking me, "That was actually you, right?" He was laughing now, saying, "It was funny prank, I guess, but you have to give up the gig. Seriously, that wasn't you whispering incoherently like that?" I said nothing at all, and thought to myself, my God, this really did happen. We talked for a bit longer, mostly me trying to convince Chris that I was not just pulling some sick prank on him, before shortly after getting ready to go to sleep, and logging off for the night. Shook and fear of what happened rose back to high after he reminds me of that detail though. That whispering really wasn't me, and why did my computer turn off? I recollected in my thoughts. That night laying in my dark room, all I could think about was what just happened to me. I fell asleep. Unfortunately, I began having a nightmare, and it was just a reenactment of what just happened to me, but from a different view. It was like I was watching what happened through the eyes of whatever I believe was tormenting me. I saw it shut off, the lights from my bedroom and my brother's room, then walks in the bathroom. But just before it shuts off the bathroom lights, it looks in a mirror just above the sink. Pale white skin, long black hair, and eyes that were as black as a new moon. I wake up after seeing this, my heart racing out of my chest. At least I got a full night's sleep. I shut my eyes, had this one dream, and it was daytime practically. The dream felt extremely short and vivid oddly. Never have I been so frightened. This night was the worst. 3 years later, here I am. I still live in the same house with my family and pets. Since this night, I have never heard another footstep down my hallway or heard a light shut off on its own. Although I do continue seeing it, that little ghostly girl, that thing. She is in my dreams from time to time, watching. Much less now than before, but she makes it clear she's still there. I don't know her or its intentions, whatever it is. But I just hope it is here to protect me or do good, if nothing else. I work as a home inspector in Atlanta, Georgia. I have done more than 1,000 home and building inspections in my time as an inspector. Just for context, the oldest home in the state is located in Savannah, Georgia, about 3 to 4 hours from Atlanta. This house, which is called the Herb House, is claimed to have been built in the 1730s, which does have some skeptics as to why it was really built. I tell you this because as a home inspector, I inspect all sorts of homes. Old, new, decrepit, pristine, and pre-construction. Basically, if it's a home, I can and will inspect it. I work in Atlanta and metro Atlanta areas for the most part, and the oldest home in Atlanta is the Joseph Willis House. It was built in the 1840s and is still located at its original location. The oldest building I've inspected was a church. I don't remember where. It was built in the late 1800s. The home that this story is about was built in the early 1900s in Atlanta. If you're not familiar with crawl spaces beneath houses, then you are lucky. A crawl space is an area under the house that is just dirt, used for things such as storage or placing the water heater or HVAC units. Depending on how well the owners take care of the crawl space, there would be plastic covering the dirt and it would be clean. Most homeowners don't upkeep their crawl spaces, and they are covered in spider webs, bugs everywhere, pools of water, and the wood flooring just covered in mold. This particular house that I was inspecting had been sitting empty for quite a while, and the crawl space was full of discarded trash, a very old furnace or boiler, depending on where you're from. This crawl space was also very low. I'm a big guy, and it was tough to crawl around. Some crawl spaces you can stand up in, but most you will be crawling. I was talking to my clients, and they were asking me to check specific things in a crawl space. After they finished, I began to squeeze myself in a fairly small entrance. I am wearing my headlamp, a mask to keep my breathing clean, and what I call a crawl space suit, which is just like a mechanic's jumpsuit. About 6 minutes of crawling around and taking photos and avoiding pools of water, my headlamp goes out. One of the fears I have while crawling around these houses is that the house will shift and pin me under it and I will be trapped. so when my light went out, it was complete dark, and in my mind I was anticipating the home crushing me. I tried repeatedly to get the light back on. The stupid thing was constantly doing this at the wrong moments. Over my time doing inspections, I have found a lot of things in weird places. Old soda cans, old shoes, clothing, signs. Most of it is pretty cool, and sometimes people will let me have things. Once I found a cavity in the wall that was only accessible through the attic that was near impossible to navigate, and in this cavity was a giant safe. It was open, and I guessed it was empty. I jumped down about 5 feet and took some photos. It was completely empty, but very old. There was nothing cool or interesting in this particular house that I was slowly and carefully crawling under, or so I thought. My light finally came back on, and there in front of me, washed in my beam of light, was a very old looking stone well. I could have sworn that was not there before. This was a small house, and usually the size of the house directly reflects the size of the crawl space. I could see the entire crawl space from my area. It was surprising that I missed this. I consider myself an explorer, and before I could take a photo of the well, I heard a voice. It said, "Help me." It was very ghostly and faint, and the person sounded very tired. I thought I was just hearing things when I heard, "Help me, I'm in the well, please." I began rapidly crawling towards the well. The area around the well had enough clearance for me to stand on my knees. I glanced over the edge of the well while balancing myself with my hands on the cold, damp stone wall of the well. My light shined down the well that was about 15 feet deep and only 1 foot of water, and there, sitting at the bottom of the well, is a dark-haired boy in what looks like an old-timey pajamas, clutching on a soaking wet stuffed animal. I couldn't tell what kind of animal it was. It looked so deteriorated. I gasped and said, "How'd you get down there?" All he replied was, "Help me, please." I yelled that I would be right back. I threw my gim, my headlamp, and used my inspection phone for light to crawl out of there. When I finally squeezed out of the small entrance, the client saw me and chuckled at my filthy appearance and asked me how it looked under there. I yelled at them to call 911. There's a boy in the well under there. They underestimately looked confused, and they had no idea that there was a well under their house. They began to dial, and I ran to my work truck to get my rope. I always have rope with me, ever since I saw that movie, Band Lock Saints, and one of the guys says that you can never have too much rope. I grabbed my length of rope and my extra headlight and ran back to the entrance of the crawl space and dove inside the small opening. I was crawling as fast as I could, while floor joists kept smashing into my back, reminding me that they don't care what's going on. I could hear sirens in the distance, hopefully heading to us. As I said, wherever you are in the crawl space, you can see every area. But what I didn't realize is that all my aggressive crawling has kicked up so much dirt in a space that I couldn't even see a foot in front of me. I couldn't even see where the well was. I called out, "Hey, where are you? Hello?" Just then a very bright light pierced the dust and darkness, and someone called out, "Fire department coming in." 3 firefighters crawled over me with all sorts of rescue equipment, asking me where the boy is. I tell them he's in the well. Now 4 people are kicking up dust, and we start making careful movements so that the dust can settle. Once it's settled enough, we all frantically looked for the well. We could see every area in the crawl space, and there was no well. There was no space that you could stand on your knees. There was nothing. I was completely confused. The 4 of us did some thorough investigation of the crawl space before crawling out and finding nothing. I was adamant about seeing that well, and that boy was asking for help. I could remember vividly the feel of the cold, damp stone well wall. I could not explain anything. I couldn't answer any of their questions. The police informed me that I need to be sure of something before I call 911. It was so strange. This was my first paranormal experience, and now I know how others feel and what the true definition of eerie is. Now, every time I enter into a building for an inspection, I apologize to anything that may be there for invading their space, but I will leave shortly. I haven't seen anything since that day, and I hope whoever that was at the bottom of that well finds peace. Maybe all he wanted was my headlamp. I never found it after I tossed it down to him. This happened last year in Virginia, and is also the reason I never backpack alone anymore. I was taking summer courses at the time, and we ended up with a 3-day weekend in June. so I thought it was a great time to go explore some of Virginian wilderness. I did a quick Google search and found a state park with a trail. The trail looked nice, so I let my roommate and family know that I was going to be going on the trip. When I got close to the park area, I saw a little outdoor shop where people hiking the Appalachian Trail stop. I went in to grab a map of the area just in case I got lost. As I was talking to the owner, he mentioned a trail that's not well known, but it has a pretty cool waterfall and swimming hole. This piqued my interest, so I had him show me on the map. It took me to the outside of the state park, but he said it was a great place to go. I paid for the map and thanked the owner. I texted my roommate and parents about the new trail, and I parked my car and set off on my new adventure. I should note that the waterfall was going to be a side trip for my journey. I was planning 3 days, 2 nights. I started on part of the Appalachian Trail, and it was pretty packed with people. Some of them were really fun to talk to. As expected, the further I got from the main trail, the less people I saw. Around early afternoon, 3 miles from my destination, I noticed it was unnaturally silent. No birds, no bugs, not even wind, and I had a feeling that I was being watched. I shook it off as me overanalyzing the situation. I got to the waterfall, and it wasn't too spectacular, but it was cool to look at. Plus, it had a good size area to swim in, so naturally, I stripped down to my skivvies and took a dip. It was pretty refreshing. As I was getting my clothes back on, I started whistling to myself. It was Chill Bill because it was stuck in my head. That's when I heard something, whistle the same tune back. I thought it was a bird copying me, so I went back and forth with it, and it'll repeat whatever I whistled. I thought it was pretty neat. As I was setting up camp, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being watched again. Like I'd get goosebumps and my hairs would stand up. As night fell, I built a small fire and lit my jet boil to make dinner. As I did this, I became hyper aware that again there was no sound, just deafening silence. Some part of my brain was telling me that I'm not safe and to leave. I ignored it and crawled into my tent with my flashlight and a book. I went to sleep without incident. When I woke up the next morning, my sight was trashed. My camp stool was nowhere to be found. My bear bag with my food was cut down and the contents were thrown across the site. My first thought was a crafty animal chewed through the rope and got at the bag, but I looked at the rope and it was cut with something very sharp. Plus, none of the food was even touched. I also noticed bear footprints all around my campsite. Keep in mind, I'm at least 6 to 8 miles from the road. As I was looking at the mess, I heard a branch snap off in the distance. I turned to look in that direction. I saw nothing, but I heard the whistling again. My whistle from yesterday. But it was different. It sounded more sinister. It made my hair stand on end, and this is when I listened to my instincts to get the hell out. It sounded like it was a little off in the distance, so I packed up my camp as fast as I could. The whistling got closer as I finished stuffing the tent into my bag. I didn't bother with putting anything away properly. The whistling was incessant and sounded like it was coming from all directions. I got fed up with the whistling and stood and yelled, "Shut up, and what the fuck do you want?" It stopped whistling, and it was quiet for a moment, then it repeated what I said in my voice. It sounded just like me, but distorted, like it came from an old TV. After I heard this, I immediately threw my pack on and ran the direction I came. I heard him moving just behind me, fast, switching between my whistle and my voice. It felt like it was toying with me, not coming too close, but not being too far. Eventually, it sounded like it got further and further away from me. Then it stopped. When it stopped, I stopped and turned around. I wished I didn't because I heard the most bone-chilling screech ever coming from right next to me. That's when I started running again. I did not dare to look back. I only ran. Less than a half mile I ran into a couple that was also backpacking. They saw the look of terror in my face and asked if that was me that screamed. They also asked if I was okay. I told them about what happened, and they decided to not go down where I just came from. We moved to a more populated trail, as quickly as we could. As soon as I got back in my car, I drove to one of the park's ranger stations and reported what happened. Since the site was off park grounds, they told me that it wasn't in their jurisdiction, but they'll send a ranger to investigate. The ranger station's parking lot run right up to the woods, and when I was getting into my Jeep, I heard the Chill Bill tune coming from the woods just in front of me. I never drove so fast in my life. When I told my roommate at home everything that happened in the woods, the first thing he said was, "Bro, I'm never going camping with you."